Hi, everybody. I am Allie. I am a co author on Sovereign Liberated Women Who Boldly Claim Their Power. So, for those of you who don't have the book or you do, this is it. And my chapter is towards the front. And I am so thankful that you are here with me today for me to read my chapter to you. And I hope you enjoy it. It's called A Moment in Time. To begin, as David Copperfield did, I was born on a Thursday in June to parents who had a fiery relationship. Words were thrown back and forth as confusion abounded. There was a lot of worry over my birth, as well as the status of the relationship in question. My maternal grandfather told me the story of when he met my paternal grandfather. The two shared their doubts and worries over how the young couple would fare with their new role as parents. As it was, I had grown up at a distance from my father, only seeing him a handful of times around the holidays and such. To say my parents were quite young and ill prepared for the trials and tribulations that life was about to throw at them would be an understatement. My mother and father already had a son, my older brother, who was just a short year and 6 months older than myself. My father and mother were in the military and decided to leave the military to have me. Well, if truth be told, my mother had me to be able to get out of the military. And my father was not at the hospital for my birth, and I do not know how long it took him to reach my mother's side after this was indicative of their relationship, one wanting the other, while the other was off doing whatever it was that they did. They were young and immature, both hurting each other despite their crazy obsession one for the other. I believe, having been born under these strange circumstances of unrequited fiery love and passion, that I obtained my fiery spirit. I grew up always ready for the next fight, looking over my shoulder and in a constant state of fight or flight mode, usually the latter winning over any chance of fleeing and survival. This eventually lent itself to a persistent state of anxiety, fear of abandonment, and a general dis-ease with people. I was also shy, scared, and timid, looking for love in all the wrong places. I wanted so much to just be loved and taken care of for once. I often felt that I was on my own, left to my own devices to care for myself. I was always in the present moment, along with a yearning for a perfect future away from the life that I led. Learning to appreciate any authentic moment that came my way was essential for my too big heart that felt everything so intensely. I was constantly on the search for the feelings and affections that I willingly gave to any passerby, that I infrequently received myself. Honesty, integrity, support, love, affection, kindness, acknowledgement, and the list goes on. This did not make for a stable life growing up. My father was not around, and my mother worked multiple jobs to support us with the help of her parents. The reasons they were not together are their own, and of little consequence to me anyway, seeing as the only thing I was affected by was my father's absence, not whatever their reasons were for not being together. My mother was essential to my growth. She was a catalyst, throwing me off course, like a ship who had lost its anchor at sea. The winds, like a hurricane, heavy at my back, thrashing me this way and that, with no clear course as to where I was, what I was going to do next, or even where I would end up. It was this tumult that I had found myself in that was the projection point for where I was going. She was the bow, and I was the arrow, hurtling full speed into the wild unknown forest that was my life. My grandmother was my sole consolation in a world that I did not understand, one I did not feel part of. In school, at home, really anywhere I went, I felt alone. My grandmother understood me. She cared for me. When I needed to cry, she was always there with a shoulder to cry on, something to drink, a hug, and a shopping trip already on the agenda. Childhood trauma cuts deep. It leaves scars that only the self can see until you share them with others. Then they came out whether then they come out whether you want them to or not. As a young adult, I went looking for danger, like a fox on the prowl on an overly foggy morning with nothing but his wits about him. I learned to be fast, think fast, to anticipate what others were thinking, feeling, and doing. This was not at all good for my interpersonal relationships. As with any unhealed person, I was all too often on the defensive, whether the threat was real or non-existent. I longed for home and hearth, somewhere I could finally call my own, a place I felt I belonged to and where someone actually wanted me to be. Not somewhere I felt a burden to those around me. Just like the bee who lives in his hive and works tirelessly to make his honey, I was willing to do whatever it took to find a place that I would prosper. Lessons learned. I met a stranger when I was 17. I was working at the telephone company MCI, and he was in the same beginner class that I was in. One night, after it had freshly snowed, we got out of work at 9 p.m. I was alone and unable to get into my car. From somewhere in the back of the dark parking lot, a car had turned on its lights and started to slowly drive toward me. I was stranded, stuck like a deer in headlights, watching the car come toward me. You hear stories about girls alone in a dark parking lot, having been raped by my ex-boyfriend's brother just 5 short months beforehand. I was incredibly familiar with of being a statistic of rape by someone you knew. Every hair on my body stood on end, a warning against the coming attack that I had recently experienced. I was frozen with fear as I watched this car creep closer and closer to me. Anxiety had become my constant companion. Bells were going off in my head, and my breath was caught in my throat and left me unable to breathe. My chest was so tight it hurt. Suddenly, I heard a male voice. Do you need help? Even though I did, I heard the warning bells in my head. My voice came out tight and foreign. No, I'm fine, thanks. Then, just like that, they were gone. I was alone in my world with my thoughts, fear, my constant companion. The next day, the same guy from the night before approached me. He looked suave in a very modern, gangster kind of way. He was wearing a cream two-piece outfit, his pants were baggy and creased, shirt was two-tone with navy blue on top and the bottom half matching his cream-colored pants. For some strange reason, he was wearing sunglasses inside and his hair was spiked in a way that was trendy back then. I was sitting alone, as I usually did, and he sat at my two-person table. Hey, you're the girl from last night. I've been watching you. Do you want to hang out? My mind raced. Was he stalking me? How long had he been watching me, and why was he watching me? Simply saying that he was watching me set an alarm off in my head all over again. Up until that point, I made it my mission to be and act invisible. I didn't like drawing attention to myself. I preferred to sit ramrod straight, just like a statue, so that I didn't draw any attention to myself. Maybe if I didn't move, no one would see me or take any notice. No, I have a boyfriend. While a lie, it was a half-truth. I had fancied myself in love with my third-grade crush that I practically lived next door to. He had been my dreamboat since the first time I had ever seen him getting on the bus early one snowy February morning. Eventually, he had worn me down and I acquiesced to his request to join him and his friends one moonless night for a jaunt up to the mountains of Colorado. We drove on dark and winding dirt roads that seemingly went on forever. We drove through pitch-black tunnels, and being boys, they stopped the car for a bit of mischief. We were only 17 after all. With the car lights off and no sounds around us, the boys started to scratch on the car, as if the tunnel we sat in was haunted. I did not find this amusing, and I was already convinced that, while in those isolated mountains in the middle of the night, I would finally kill or be killed. I would defend myself with all I had against two boys who were stronger and bigger than me. We finally came off that dark mountain, and several weeks later, I had found myself ensconced in a relationship that I hadn't really wanted, only to escape a situation I had previously found myself in while living with friends. The relationship was anything but rosy. The abuse started almost immediately. I was pushed into walls, slapped across the face while I was driving. I was frustrated that I had allowed myself to get into that situation. I wandered so far that eventually I found the devil. He tossed aside any semblance of innocent joy in youth. He was a thief who stole my happiness. It was as though a beautiful, pure white swan was cast into a pit of vipers. I was desperate for a way out. With every blow I received, I gave as good as I got. I eventually found myself pregnant with my first child. Still, the abuse continued. I was thrown against walls and punched in the face. There was a time he threw me on the ground, and I threw a cereal box at him in self-defense, which resulted in him calling the police. At this point, he had been cheating on me with every girl he saw. There was a girl he worked with that he had gotten pregnant. It happened when he had sent me away to time out at my family's house out of town. I knew he had been with other girls. I confronted him when I forcefully found my way back to the place I called home. When you ask God for patience, He delivers in ways you can never imagine. My happiness was on hold while I was busy learning these lessons the hard way. I'm sure in my youth, God gave me every opportunity to learn patience, yet I ignored Him. I was too wrapped up in myself to heed any warning to the strict Catholic upbringing I had been taught all of my life. So He grabbed my attention the only way I could listen: violence. Things got so bad, but I could not reach out for help. I was drowning in the middle of the ocean and no one saw me. I was screaming as loud as I could in my head, waiting, hoping that someone would pull me up for air. The cuts and scars on my body were my cry for help. Help me, please help me. Over and over, this was my mantra. My body had been used, abused, and discarded with ease. My soul shattered and the darkness consumed me. He had offered me false hope and promises. He gave me a ring that was not meant for me. Hide those scars, I was told. It was like I had become a beacon of shame for my family, who hadn't cared to see the abuse. I thought I was screaming loud enough for them to see me. When I was 18, without knowing the full weight of my actions nor the consequences that would follow, I was married. Common law in Colorado is strong, and it is binding. I had no wedding ceremony, for I was not worth it. Just legal documents stating I was married, child after child. I agreed because who wants to be an unwed mother? At least this was an illusion of happiness. But illusions always end. My harsh reality came crumbling down when it became public knowledge that he had ended my relationship by marrying the woman he spent years cheating on me with. However, he never divorced me. I was not worth that either. I spent 16 years married to a man I tried to give everything to for 8. His passing in 2020 marked the beginning of a new era for my children and myself. I could breathe again. I could see out of the murky water. Like the dawn set to come up each morning, I had renewed hope that once again everything would be okay. Finding salvation. In 2017, I was in the park playing with my children. A man walked up to me and introduced himself. His name was James. The lightning bolt that went through me told me everything I needed to know the instant our eyes met. It was magnetic and it was magic. I knew that this man would embed himself in my very being until the day that I died. Something strange happened that day and every day that we worked together. He changed me in ways that I did not understand. He pushed me and made me grow just by being there. I searched for answers on what was happening to me. When he stood next to me, the energy was so intense, so unadulterated and pure. I had never felt anything like it. It felt as if God Himself had touched my soul when we touched. His kisses told me there was somewhere safe in this world to go. He was safe and He was love. The energy seemed to dance before us. Without the need to speak, we listened and we heard. It was as if we were in the middle of a forest, surrounded by magical creatures that danced, sang, and enchanted us with their magic in this fairy temple. He brought about my healing at a time when a shadow of darkness hung heavy in my heart and sank my soul into the cold ground. I felt my soul beckon me to learn to stand in my sovereignty, to call in my soul family, the tribe I had lost at birth through the crossing of the veil. The time was now to take back my power and to realize that in the darkness, I am the light. For too long, I had snuffed out my light. While others shined, I faded into the inky dark night. My soul started yearning, and I was set on fire once more for life, for passion, and for all things brought on by pure magic. I learned to meditate. I learned to let my soul listen, to hear, and to write. God spoke to me through this man, without him saying a word. Be still and know that I am God. The words spun around me as if I were an animated character, with the wind descending hundreds of cherry blossoms all around me. The road to self-love and healing. I needed to focus on love. However, instead of turning my love desperately outward, it was time to turn my love to myself. For too long, I had sat in the thick, dense fog of my life, veiled by what was, and blinded to what could have been. I needed to lift the veil and dissipate the fog that hung around, submerged so deep underwater that I could scarcely breathe. The fire burned bright and the passion within me danced like flames. It ignited my childhood innocence, once long forgotten, back to life. The time was now to reflect on where I was and what I really wanted. This man was my wake-up call. I needed to heal from the scars and deep-rooted trauma that angrily ruled my life up until this point. The time for rest was over. After a soul-weary 30 years, I was finally ready to step out of the shadows and do the work that I was meant to do. There was a longing in my soul that I finally understood. I did not know the exact work I needed to do, but I knew that it needed to be done. I needed to bring balance and healing into my life. I started looking, searching, clawing my way out of this hole. I was looking for answers to what this profound event was. I searched and found many in the same boat as me. We all seemed to be starting on the same journey, some just a few short months ahead of me. Every time I took a step forward, someone was there to guide me. They seemed to show up out of nowhere, helping me learn, paving the path, and bringing in old transitions that were seemingly lost to another lifetime. I learned to let love flow through me, to stop holding on so tight to the rope that would eventually burn me. With this release, I found hope that was not there before. I knew that whatever happened, I was okay, learning to live in harmony and to listen to the music that life had provided me for so long. With the season came a new release and new learning. Rain brought purification, the full moon brought new lessons and manifestations. Secret whispers heard in the dark of night. For the first time, I felt in communion with those around me. One day, I sat in meditation, I lit my buchu, and began to breathe, in, then out, and in, then out. I felt so loved, held, and guided. Breathing suddenly became difficult, and it was like God lifted my soul up to his face and breathed into it, claiming my soul for himself to let me know that I belonged to him and no one else. He had kissed my soul. At that moment, I found something I had never found in church. I found him. I found God and knew that he had never left me. He told me I had a purpose. I had a mission that I must fulfill. I had not gone through almost 20 years of every kind of abuse imaginable to just stop and live a meaningless life. I was shown the healing I was to do, women I was to save, the children crying, scared in the dark, from the monsters just outside their doors. I had been on my journey for about 6 months at this point. I was enrolled in holistic healer classes and devoured everything I could find on healing. I enrolled in my associate degree and earned that in 2 years' time. My journey had started in earnest and still continues to this day. I have met many members of my soul tribe, fellow travelers who have supported me on my journey, and many more I wish to meet. I have come further than I ever thought I could during my abuse. I feel as if my soul has come into alignment and I no longer recognize the scared, timid, shy girl of my past. I have come a long way, yet I have a long way to go. I am so grateful for everyone in my life, past, present, and to come. They have taught me amazing lessons about myself and have pushed me forward in a positive way, though it may not have felt that way at the time. Every lesson has been a miracle, and every lesson has been a gift that I hope to share with many people. Thank you so much for coming to my chapter reading of Sovereign. I will post journal questions down below, so check those out. Thank you so much for spending a few moments with me.